See, okay, it's working. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Day 3, first slot of the day. Anyone been here the last 2 days? Yeah? Okay, well done. Has everyone voted yet? Okay, still we've got till 10 o'clock. Don't forget your photo ID. So I'm Bronwen, I'm the CMO at Finisterre, and I'm here to talk to you today about some pretty non-scientific, to be honest, tips for building and marketing a better business. Now, I haven't always worked at a better business. I actually started my career in Adland at JWT, rest in peace, working for Shell. So I have spent the last 15 years trying to redeem my soul. After a number of years on the agency side, I moved over client side at Burberry and got to be part of the digital revolution there under Christopher Bailey and Angela Ahrendts. From Burberry, I really got my taste for apparel and retail, and I made the move to, at the time, a little-known Canadian company called Lululemon, who was looking to enter the European market. Being Canadian myself, I jumped at the opportunity. I spent the majority of my career at Lululemon, and in the last few years, I just found myself getting increasingly frustrated about the lack of sense of urgency around the sustainability challenges, in particular in a business where 90% plus of the product was made from virgin petrochemicals. So COVID hit, I was on mat leave, and an opportunity came up to join a tiny startup called Pangaea, which was a material science brand. It launched into the scene during COVID. In our first 8 months, we did 75 million in turnover, all through selling sustainable, colorful tracksuits. So you could say the timing was perfect for a global pandemic to hit. And from there, I also really got that taste for being in a business whose modus operandi was to be better, to figure out how do we change the system and how do we make sure that the impact we're having on the planet is hopefully more positive. After a couple of years at Pangaea, the opportunity to join Finisterre came along, and Finisterre, we're going to learn a little bit more about who they are in a minute, but they really are the leaders, both being B-Corp but in the sustainability space, and it felt like an opportunity that I couldn't say no to. So that's enough about me. So I want to know who you are. So can you, just through hands, who here is from an agency? Okay, great. Who's client side? Excellent. Who already thinks they work, or who thinks they work for a better business, or knows they work for a better business already? Great. Who would like to work for a better business? Okay, all right. This conversation isn't for just one particular group. I've tried to make it as broad as possible. Also for C-suite or founders, but also all the way through to middle managers in multinational corporations. It's designed to be helpful for everyone. So who's Finisterre? So for those of you who don't know, we are a B-Corp certified outdoor apparel brand. We're based down in beautiful St. Agnes in Cornwall. Our roots are in cold water surf, but we make outdoor apparel for really any outdoor pursuit. We're 21 years old with a predominantly UK business. We started D2C, but we now have 11 stores across the UK, but we're growing quickly in Northern Europe and North America. I'm going to just play a very short video now, and it's really just, in case you don't know who we are, to give you a taste of the mood and sort of how we show up in the world.
Malin Hebrides, west or southwest, 4 or 5, veering northwesterly 5 to 7, rain at times, moderate or good. Bailey, southwesterly 5, veering northwesterly 5 to 7, occasionally gale 8, rain at times, moderate or good. Fair Isle, northwesterly 5,
So last year we celebrated our 20th anniversary, but 20 years ago we were founded by this guy. This is Tom Kay. He's still our founder. He's still in the business. I think I fell I've got funny hair. Is it? Okay. So, sorry. Tommy now has no hair, so I'm glad he's not here because that may have felt like a bit of a dig. So Tom was a chartered surveyor from Norfolk who had gone via London and then ended up down in St. Agnes. He was a volunteer helm for the RNLI and has remained so for over 20 years. But he surfed in the UK, and one day, whilst bobbing out at sea in the freezing cold, sideways rain, as often is the case if you're a British surfer, he realized that the surf industry really wasn't speaking to him, and it wasn't speaking to the British surf scene. The surf industry was California, Hawaii, Australia. It was hot, it was bikinis, it was board shorts. It wasn't freezing cold, numb fingers. It wasn't the terribly unsexy neoprene wetsuits. But he felt as though they were missing an opportunity. At the same time, he was really frustrated that all of these surf brands were building this business off the back of this industry whilst making product that was damaging the very ocean that they relied upon in order to surf. So right from day one, he really felt as though it was an opportunity to both speak to cold water surf, but also create product that didn't cost the planet and the ocean in particular. And so Finisterre was born. It started with a fleece. This is the one he's wearing. It's still around to this day. It cost over 100 pounds. It was made with recycled polyester, which at the time was incredibly hard to come by. Patagonia were really the only other ones playing with it at the time. But the main thing is that sustainability was in the DNA from day one. Now, the thing with a better business is that you don't kind of just say you're going to do it and then start and then job done. It never ends. The work never ends. It is constantly innovating. It is getting it wrong and fixing it and trying again. And so over the last 2 decades, we have tried a lot of things. In 2008, we launched our repairs service. Really, that just started because people started sending Tom. They'd send back their fleece and go, oh, I melted it next to the campfire. Can you fix this? And his mum was fixing the things half the time. But it eventually spiraled and grew. And this was way before anybody else was really doing repairs. A number of years later, we worked with a British shepherdess, Leslie Pryor, to help bring back the British merino wool industry. In 2014, we invested in fluorocarbon-free waterproofs, which anyone here who owns a waterproof jacket, I won't name and shame, but the vast majority of waterproof jackets are made with forever chemicals, fluorocarbons. They're really terrible. Going fluorocarbon-free, again, it wasn't the easier choice. It wasn't the cheaper choice. It was very much an unknown. The material wasn't tested out there, but we knew we couldn't be bringing a waterproof into the market that was just perpetuating the problems. In 2017, we hired the world's first wetsuit recycler. So wetsuits, 99% of them are made out of neoprene. Neoprene is a petrochemical. It is nasty, nasty stuff. It is so nasty that it has never disappeared. So every piece of neoprene that has ever been created still exists on this planet. It's often used to line landfill because the poisonous residue from landfill literally cannot penetrate neoprene. We wanted to fix that. We were like, how can we at least extend the life of neoprene wetsuits that are already in existence? Is there a way to recycle them? Then a number of years later, we actually moved away from neoprene entirely and moved to Ulex, which is a natural rubber solution. It uses 80% less carbon than neoprene, and increasingly what we're learning is that it has a better end of life as well. And then a number of years ago, in 2022, we launched Wetsuits from Wetsuits, which was our attempt to go really with the work that the wetsuit recycler was doing is how do we take all of these neoprene wetsuits or Ulex and actually turn them into another wetsuit. And actually, this autumn, in the next few weeks, we're going to be launching our first commercialized product. It is sadly not a wetsuit. The technology hasn't got there yet. So again, we didn't get it right. We haven't completed that work yet, but we will be bringing out a commercialized product. I can't tell you what it is yet, but it'll be launching in our autumn-winter range, and it's made of entirely old neoprene wetsuits. So, audience participation. My head is in the way. What do we mean by better business? So, before we keep talking about this, I thought it'd be helpful to actually define what we mean. So does anybody feel brave or bold, as that is the theme of the day? I want to have a go, no wrong answer, and saying what they think a better business is. I'm spotting my moles. Yes.
Hello? Oh, there we go. I feel like a bit better business is probably one that tries to create a better output than they take from the environment that they're taking from. So obviously, if you're trying to recycle any products you're creating or doing offsets, I'm just going to lean on that one, doing offsets or anything like this, I think this is what a better business sort of equate to. So,
Yeah, great. Thank you. Anyone else?
I think better business balances people, profit, and planet.
Yeah, love that.
I think a better business has purpose and builds community.
Yeah, love that. Thank you. Thanks, Nikki. So we've got another one.
I think a better business should be one that is being really honest about where they're going wrong. And so many businesses are afraid of doing that.
Yeah.
Possibly mine included.
Love that. So there's no one way to define it, but ultimately what I'm hearing is like, it's this sense of consciousness of impact. So the impact that business is having, balancing people, community, as well as the planet, and really just having this sense of legacy of what are we going to actually be leaving behind. Does that sound all right? Okay, so what you've all been waiting for. Like I said, not scientific, not exhaustive. I probably had 20, so it was actually hard to get down. And I really don't know if I'm an expert, but I've done my best, so you can let me know how you feel at the end. So first, number one, find a purpose that is bigger than you, but authentic to you. Now, lots of brands have purposes, and having a purpose is great. But having a purpose that is bigger than you can have a purpose to make a tasty mayonnaise. And like, great, we make tasty mayonnaise. But like, that's just focused on the product, the mayonnaise. You're not talking about the impact of said mayonnaise or the people who are enjoying the mayonnaise or the people who are creating the products to make that mayonnaise. You need to find a purpose that's bigger than you. And in a way, it's like, it's humbling. It's taking the ego out of it. And it's making sure that everything you're doing as a business, your North Star, is going towards something that's going to have a bigger impact. So how do you do this? I've stolen this from an agency called Red Antler in the States. They wrote a great book. And they do something called the DEAD test. It's not a great name, I think, to be honest. They could do with rebranding it. But I found it really helpful. And so the first thing you do is you just need to be focused entirely on your muse or your target customer. If you don't know why your business exists or who that first customer was, often if you're founder-based, it's you as the founder, but really obsess over who are they? Why do they, like, what gets them out of bed in the morning? What are their values? What are they passionate about? And just make sure you get to know you have the time to get to know who they are. Then you ask yourself, why do you exist for them? On the most obvious level. But then you keep asking why. So why do I exist? Well, why does that matter? Well, why do I exist? Why does that matter? And keep going until you're dead. Because inevitably, your customer, you'll be dead. There can be no other reason. Once you're dead, you then just go back one or two steps. And in those deeper levels of asking why, you're going to unlock an insight. So what did that look like for Finisterre? Back over here. Can you see it past that? Okay. I hope so. I'm going to say it anyway. So when we think about our target customer or our muse, they're a millennial. They are surfers. They're soulful. They have this sense of like they're an old soul. They resonate with stories and with things with meaning. And they live a more sustainable life. So sustainability is really important to them. So we ask why we exist for them. First and foremost, we make great, high-quality, sustainable outdoor apparel that helps them get outside and has a lower impact than the alternative. Great, easy peasy. Why does that matter? Well, because if they have shitty gear, they can't spend time outside. Why does that matter? Well, because spending time outside makes them feel better. And that's important because these are millennials, and millennials started this wellness revolution. We're all, like, who had kombucha yet today, or green juice, or avocados on toast? Like, we're all enjoying these essential fatty acids and more robust vitamin diets because of millennials, and we're probably going to SoulCycle and berries and doing all of these things. So Millennials are really this first generation who have put self-care at the heart of everything they do. And what they know is that being outside and being in nature makes them feel better, and it becomes a non-negotiable. Why is that important? Millennials and the surfer part of them and the soulfulness, that speaks to their feeling as though they're a bit counterculture. They don't want to live the life that is expected of them. They don't want to do the obvious. They want to have an extraordinary life. And normal life can get in the way of that. Why does that matter? Because they don't want to die feeling as though they've never really lived. They want to die feeling as though they've wrung out every opportunity that they've had in their existence and that they've been present and that it's been meaningful. So we got to the dead part, and then we just went back. And it was between this feeling better, this being extraordinary, that we felt as though there was a nugget of magic. And so what we unlocked is that as surfers and being able to surf, the sea played an incredibly important part for their overall wellness. It also means they're not on their phone, so it creates this deep presence and this deep sense of being alive. And if they didn't have the sea, they weren't going to be able to live their fully expressed life. So the sea, for our customer, meant a better life. So what does that mean for our purpose? It's to inspire a deeper connection with the sea, to light fires in the bellies of everyone and connect them to the sea, to stir their romance, raise their pulses, draw out their courage, to kit them out, to tell them stories, pull them out of their comfort zone, to live healthier and more conscious lives. So having this multi-layered purpose, it gives you the scope and the North Star to go beyond the product, but also to go beyond yourself as a brand. Be a little bit less self-centered and a little bit more, how are we in service to our customer and the community around them? Okay, only at one. I'll speed up a bit. It feels very weird drinking from a tin before lunch. Okay, number 2, be realistic. There is no such thing as perfect when it comes to sustainability and impact. And all too often, I see perfect getting in the way of done. It can feel incredibly overwhelming, whether you're deciding to start a business that wants to be better, or if you're in a business that is trying to change. And it can feel as though you have to be perfect and that you need to do everything at once. You're going to burn out, so don't try. But the best thing, a really helpful tool in order to help mitigate this, is something called a materiality assessment. Now, if anyone has done B-Corp already, they're probably familiar with materiality assessments. Equally, if you are sorry, I thought I skipped ahead. Woo! If you are a business with a lot of revenue in Europe, watch out, because as of January 2026, you will be it would be legally mandatory that you do a double materiality assessment. And so I think you have to have over 250 employees in the EU and over 175 million in revenue there. So if you are one of those businesses and you're not already thinking about this, you need to get ahead. But a materiality assessment, it sounds quite formal, but really what you're doing is you're talking to your stakeholders and you're going, what matters most to them? And then you're measuring that up against where do you think you can actually have the most impact. So the first thing you do is you actually just write down where are all the areas that as a business we can probably impact. Is it social welfare? Is it environmental justice? Is it carbon capture? Is it supply chain management? Is it social conversations? Where are the things that we can actually impact? If you're an agency, you don't have a supply chain. So there's going to be very little in a supply chain that you're looking at. Whereas for Finisterre, we have a massive supply chain. So we have a lot that we need to be looking at. You get all of those down, and then you determine who your stakeholders are. So stakeholders can be and are employees, investors, people along your supply chain. We have done 2 crowd raises, so we've got crowdfunders. We've got a crowdfunder in the room today, so very exciting. So you determine who all your stakeholders are, and then you determine of that group, who are you actually going to speak to. You go out, you survey them, and then you ask them to evaluate all these different areas and rate them on how important is it that you think we tackle this. Once you get that back, you then match that against overall impact. And this is what this looks like. This isn't ours. We're actually just undertaking ours for the first time. And we've been B-Corp for 6 years. So you don't have to do it as part of your B-Corp. It does take quite a lot of time. But it's a really great way to find focus. So what this anonymous internet-found brand has done is that they've weighted against financial materiality and impact materiality, and they've plotted them all out based on the survey responses. And really, the ones they're going to be going for are this top right quadrant. That's where they can have the most impact, both financially, but also in terms of perception, risk aversion, etc. So this is a great way if you're feeling overwhelmed with there's too much stuff to do. Where can we actually win? Where is the most risk, both internally with what employees might think, but externally with what the market might think? This is a great way to plot it out. It's also increasingly part of B-Corp, and if you're a big company in the EU, it's coming your way. So once you've done the materiality and you've figured out what you're going to focus on, it's really important that you set goals. And they need to be measurable, they need to be realistic, and you need to have some accountability behind them. And goals are great, because we're addicted to goals. Goals feel good. Goals are why Instagram exists, because you get that lovely little endorphin hit every time you see somebody's liked something. You're like, ooh, I've like achieved. There's an achievement there. Isn't that great? I don't know if anybody else in the room likes to write a to-do list that 50% of it is the things you've already done. That's my favorite thing to do in the morning. I feel like it gets me off to a good start as I cross off all those things and go, aren't I clever? So you've got to set those goals, and that's both as a company level, in particular, if you have that influence to be able to come in and set impact and sustainability goals for your organization, make sure you have them and make sure they're measurable and that you've got accountability behind them. But also personally, and for your teams, even if you're in a huge organization that isn't talking about sustainability, you could set goals, sustainability goals for your own team or impact goals for your own team. When I was at Lululemon in my last few years, and they were sort of making noises about sustainability, but not going as fast as I wanted. I'd made a personal goal that as a family, we were going to be carbon neutral within the next 5 years. And that personal goal started sort of leaching into my work life. And through an amazing conversation with the tech team in Vancouver, I discovered that the biggest impact that Lululemon product actually had was on the laundry, because it was a high sweat, high wash item. And our customers felt as though it needed to be washed every single time they wore it. But actually, it was madness, because we were investing all this technology that meant that you didn't have to wash the product every time. And like, polyester is great. It dries really, really quickly. So actually, if people just hung it up, they could take it down the next day, give it a sniff. It's like, we called it the sniff test. Not very glamorous, not very sexy, really, but effective. And it was like, well, if it stinks, then wash it. But if it doesn't stink, wear it again. And so because we were over in Europe and no one paid attention to us, we created an entire post-purchase journey email flow where every single time a customer bought their new product, within 5 days they'd be told, you don't have to wash this as often. And by the way, if you don't wash it, this is the environmental impact we can have. So it was just a small way, a small sort of like, stick it to the man. I was like, even if we're not talking about sustainability as an organization, it's important to me, and here's an area I can have influence. So I gave it a shot. So you've got your goals, you've got your purpose, you've done your materiality assessment, you now have measurable goals. Now you need to empower your people. This is something that I think is the most neglected. And I think this is neglected from a marketing, a reach, a growth. If your people aren't engaged and connected to your purpose and happy to show up every day, you're missing a trick. But individual impact can only go so far, where collective impact is huge. So talk to your people, listen to them, ask them what part of the materiality assessment, ask your employees what matters most to them. But also just talk to them in your one-to-one and go, today, has everybody here given their staff time to go and vote? We have a crisis amongst our young people in this country who don't feel as though their vote matters. Have you taken the time to educate them on the privilege behind vote, why they should vote, and make sure that you're then enabling them to go out and do it? Make it easy for them to have impact. You'll keep them more engaged. You'll keep them for longer, and they'll show up happier every day. Another thing to do is really important is like connect that back to your purpose. So this photo was taken in March, and we have a meeting every Tuesday called Sea Tuesday. It is from 9 till 10, and it isn't actually a meeting. It is an opportunity to go and connect to the sea in any way you see fit. For the team, our office is just above that cliff, and for the team down in St. Agnes, it usually involves a swim. The ocean was about 7 degrees here. That's Ben Mobbs, who works in e-com and goes to the gym a lot, you can tell. And then we've got lots of people who didn't go in the water, but they're having a moment to connect to the sea and to connect to each other. And it's just a reminder to the entire organization of why we do what we do. It is about this connection to the sea. It's also a really great mental health break. It's when you're in the ocean and it's freezing cold and there's seals and there's waves and you're going, holy fuck, why did I do this? I could have been at home in bed. Like, you're just present. You feel alive. You're reminded that you're a tiny little organism in this huge big world, and you're humbled. And you forget about your to-do list, and you forget about, oh, that thing that person said to you that was really kind of annoying, and like, oh, I wish my partner was just like better. Or like, you just let go of all that shit, and you're like, okay, stay alive, keep swimming. And then you come out and you feel better. And also, the sad thing is that if you swim in a British beach, 9 times out of 10, when you're walking out, you're gonna come across some plastic. So you're gonna pick that up and go, this is shitty. I wonder if it's never gonna happen. And again, if you're at a British beach, 1 out of 4 times, the beach is actually gonna be shut because of sewage leak. In St. Agnes this year, we've already had 21 closures of St. Agnes Beach due to sewage leakage. So it's the mental health benefit, but it's also the reminder of there's work to do, and this is why we're here. How are we doing on time? Good, okay, phew. Forget the joy. It is so easy to make it feel sad and serious and fearful. But fear doesn't motivate people, it paralyzes them. Where joy is this great motivator. Joy also brings people who aren't necessarily already engaged along for the ride. At Pangaea, so much of what the genius of it was that we didn't show up as a traditional sustainable brand. We weren't granola and hempy. We were like cool tech, Justin Bieber, and like we were tricking people into buying organic and recycled cotton tracksuits. Like they didn't care necessarily that we were sustainable, but we made it so fucking sexy that they bought into it, and then next thing you know, they're buying into a better product. So joy is this great way of, first of all, making sure that you keep people motivated, that they have hope, but also that you bring more along with you on the ride. So I'm going to play a quick little trailer. This still is from an image from a movie called Granny Grommets. Every year around International Women's Day, we do a Women's Filmmaker Fund award. And we do that because the surf industry has a toxic masculinity problem. Women are either overly sexualized or invisible. And we wanted to change that by creating a pipeline of more female filmmakers within the industry. So last year, we had an incredible pitch from a young woman in London, Leah Rustamji. And she had found this story out of Australia of this group of women over 60 who call themselves the Granny Grommets and who go surfing together. And she went out and she spent a week with them and she's told their story. It's a beautiful story. It's a story of human connection and community. And there's no sadness in it. There's no like, oh, be ashamed. There's plastic in the sea. Like, stop drinking that water bottle. It's bigger than that. It's creating a connection to the sea. So, here's just a trailer. It'll be launching in September. Follow along with Finisterre's social channels to come and watch it.
Oh. As you get older, you tend to be invisible. You get a bit disregarded. With this group, we're all the same, older, and never disregarded each other. No.
So it's a beautiful film, and I do encourage you to come along. We screened it at Glastonbury last weekend, together with our partners at Water Bear, and it will be screened around our stores and other locations in September. Possibly even at Kendal, if anyone's going to Kendal Mountain Festival. So there's a deeper reason to why this was important. And the group that we're featuring are a group who are traditionally marginalized. Women over the age of 60 are told that they don't belong on the beach and they don't belong in surf. This isn't a story that you see a lot of. And so if we're able to engage with this portion of the population who have been left out, what we also know about that portion of the population is that they tend to vote, and they tend to vote a certain way, as we learned from Brexit. So if we can actually re-engage with them and tell them you do belong in the sea, your voice matters, then maybe, just maybe, at the next election, they might put the ocean at the center rather than some of their other beliefs, which are also great, but mostly ocean. Oh, care beyond the sale. I mean, I work in marketing, and I'm responsible for new customer acquisition and repeat rate and retention rates, and I'm talking to the FD about that every week and the commercial director. But it is so easy to forget about your customer once they've made that sale, and to then just try and get them to make the next one. When actually, like, how much effort should you put into making sure they love the product that they just bought? And what we've learned is that actually we want them to buy it and wear it for a very, very, very long time, to love it, to spend a lot of time in it, to hopefully rip it to shreds through doing fun activities, send it back in and get repaired. And what we've seen is that customers who come into us and who engage in any kind of a repair content, whether they send something in or they watch the how to darn your socks video, they stay with us for longer. What we don't have is this sort of bell curve of new customer acquisition, second repeat rate, and then they eventually go. Like, our customers, they come in and they just stay, and they have stayed, and the customers in particular who've engaged with repairs stay for longer. So in 2008, we launched Repairs. We now have a repair centre in St Agnes, in Bristol, and in our new London store. And to this date, we've extended the usable life of over 10,000 garments. Back in 2021, we launched resale with our partners over at Reskinned. So now you can send in secondhand Finisterre garments, which can be resold. It's also where we can send anything that's lightly damaged. Reskinned will do repairs, or will do the repairs. And that's, if you work in apparel, we know there's a big issue with, like, if something shows up with a small stain, you can't sell it. But that's a perfectly good product that actually, if you probably just washed it, would be fine. And so instead, what we can do is send it through Reskinned. Somebody can buy it, and it's also a great customer acquisition tool because they're able to come in at a lower price point that they may not be able to access otherwise. And then lastly, last summer, and we've sold over 6,500 products through Reskinned. And then last summer, we launched the world's first ULEX wetsuit repair center. And this is an online, not repair center, rental service. So this is an online ULEX wetsuit rental service, first in the world. Anyone who goes to the British seaside, you show up, you get a neoprene wetsuit. It's probably been pissed in at least 100 times. That's not very nice. Nobody wants that on their lovely holiday. Instead, you can rent your wetsuit from us. It's ULEX, so it's not nasty neoprene. It's a 400-pound wetsuit. Like, that is not what you're getting down in those little beach shacks. It definitely hasn't been pissed in. At least it's been thoroughly washed if it has. And then you can try it out. And if you want to keep it, you can then buy it, or you can send it back to us. And anyone who lives in London, the last thing you want is a wetsuit taking up some of your precious storage space. And since we launched literally about a year ago, less than, our wetsuits have been rented for over 3,000 days in less than a year. Oh my God. All my gray hair comes from this. You're going to get it wrong. And we've just come out of Pride, and I thought what was so interesting about Pride this year is I think it's the quietest I've seen in a decade. And I think as marketers, we've lost our nerve. And I don't think fewer people care about LGBTQIA rights than we did 5 years ago when everyone was doing Pride. I just think that with all of the social movement that's been happening, the voice that feels most threatened are getting louder, and they're making all of us marketers lose our nerve. And I think that's really scary. And I think where we're seeing the degradation of human rights across these Western powers is because as marketers, we do have power. We have the power to influence social change. And I'm frightened that we are listening to the bullies online, and we're not actually thinking about the legacy that we're leaving and the power that we truly wield. So that said, you're still going to get it wrong sometimes. So a year ago, we launched a t-shirt design competition. It was a lovely idea. We thought, here's an idea. Let's ask everyone in our community to design a t-shirt, and we'll choose the winning design, and we'll print it on 100 t-shirts, and 100% of proceeds will go to charity. It was lovely. We launched it on the Friday before half term in May. We figured parents could do it with their kids while they're on break. I bundled my children into the van and started driving up to North Wales, ready to really relax. 3 hours later, my WhatsApp started going ding, 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 ding. And I was like, ignore it, I'm out of office. After another few minutes, I was like, okay, this can't be ignored. What's going on? It turns out we had upset the entire illustrator and designer community of the world. Everybody was pissed off at us because we were undermining designers and illustrators, and that was against a backdrop of the rise of AI, where they already felt as though their job was being threatened. So immediately we pivoted. We were like, okay, it's not you're now going to get a fee. The winning design gets £500, great. I was like, job done. Went to bed, had a glass of wine. I was like, okay, fix that one. Woke up in the morning. We had not fixed it. It had escalated further because now we were insulting them by still letting anybody do it, still paying people, not enough money, they said, but also now we might be paying someone who wasn't an illustrator, who wasn't trying to pay off their mortgage, and they still felt like we weren't hearing what the actual problem was. So we pivoted again. We actually took the competition down, and I spent the weekend I told our social media manager for her to go on holiday. I manned the DMs, and I got into conversation with the loudest voices, the biggest illustrators who were being the most critical. And I owned it. I was like, I'm really sorry. This was absolutely not the intention. Also, I'm Bronwen, I'm CMO, and I'm gonna spend this weekend getting this right and fixing this, because your voice matters, and I'm really sorry that we've hurt you. By Monday, we got the competition back up, but this time it was for professional designers and illustrators only. I think we paid up to about £1,000. It was still only 100 t-shirts, and what we didn't want to do was get the margin to such a place that we were going to be taking away profit from the organization that was going to be getting the proceeds. So a year later, I still have nightmares about this. I don't think anyone else is still having nightmares about it. They've forgiven us. A week later, we had moved on. But it can be so easy to lose your balls because you're like, fuck, what if an internet troll yells at me? Or what if someone ats me in something? And like, the fact of the matter is you are gonna get it wrong, especially if you're being bold and you're playing in the edges and you're doing things that people haven't done before. But that's okay. Just own it, fix it, repair it, and learn from it. And never do a t-shirt design competition, ever. Terrible idea. Oh, you can't really, can you see that? I can't see it, okay. It says, create through community, not for community. This was something I learned at Lululemon, who were really the OGs in community marketing. We didn't have an ATL advertising budget. It was all done through relationships in our communities. And I think the best example of what I mean by this is creating for community is going, well, we talk to surfers, I'm gonna use AI, and I'm gonna make the most impressive surf video of all time. Creating through community is going out and finding the best surfers and making that surf video for real. It is showing up at events that already exist and making them better, or enabling them through sponsorship. It's actually paying people. Everybody has a mortgage. Everybody needs to pay for food. Asking for everything for free comes at a cost. What it is not is thinking you know best and bringing in a big external production company and going, I know what the community wants and I'm going to create it and it's going to be great and it's going to be incredible in my board presentation next week. This is a still from a shoot we did last year in Canada, and 75% of our crew were locals. Now, it's really easy for anyone who does shoots anywhere, but especially abroad, to take your entire production team out with you and you have one local fixer. But that doesn't feel as though we're serving the community. And in particular, in this instance, we were going to the western coast of Canada, which is Indigenous lands. And for those of you who don't know, they're unceded territory, which means the British colonialists, when they came in, they never actually got a treaty. The lands were literally just taken. Where the eastern part of North America and Canada, there were treaties. The treaties were terrible. They did not serve the Indigenous population, but there were treaties. West Coast, no treaties. So we were a British brand coming in, and we didn't know how to show up in a way that made the community feel seen, safe, and respected. So we reached out. Not only did we hire over 15 people from the local community to be hair, makeup, fixers, talent, photographer, videographer, social media capture, all of that. We also worked with the local Indigenous population to find out what can we do? Like, what should we do? How can we show up in a way that really honors and respects you? And so what we created together with them was a land acknowledgement. Now, this is something that's done increasingly in North America, but predominantly Canada. And it's really just a statement acknowledging that the lands and the territories we were moving through were unceded, and that they had belonged to the First Nations, who had been looking after this land since time immemorial. And, in all honesty, had really been looking after it, not like what the Brits necessarily did when they entered, we entered, I'm Canadian. what this gave us was also the courage and the understanding of how to move through the lands respectfully. But what we left behind was 15 people of the crew who now suddenly knew about Finisterre, cared about us, and were advocating on our behalf, so great marketing. But it also meant that the Indigenous population felt as though they gave us permission to be there. On the flight out, there was actually, it's like every marketer's nightmare. The guys sat behind us were from another British brand, also going to Canada to shoot their autumn-winter campaign. I was like, oh, great, it was great that we've all had the same idea. And I was like, so how many of you are coming out? They're like, oh, 11. I was like, wow, that's a big crew. Like, how many do you have in Vancouver waiting for you? They're like, oh, 2, just the talent. I was like, wow, okay, so you haven't hired anyone in Vancouver beyond the models. No. Everybody wanted to come. It's going to be a great trip. I was like, well, where are you going? Oh, we don't really know. Just like somewhere past Whistler, and it's going to be great. I was like, you have no fucking clue, do you? And like they came in, they spent all of they hired their people to do jobs that locals could have done. They exploited from the land, and they missed this golden opportunity as a marketer to leave behind people who are going to advocate for them. I won't name them, but I did look at their pictures, and I didn't think their pictures were as good as ours after. So anyway. Okay. Work. Stop making shitty work. And like, I'm married to a creative and ad agency. I don't think ad agencies are responsible for shitty work. I think clients are. I also think there's just too much work. And there's just too much stuff out there. And every little piece of content has an impact on the planet. Like, so make better work, make it in a better way, and then sweat those assets. You know, at Finisterre, we made so much stuff. Every week we were churning out surf videos. And I was like, guys, we don't have a retention issue, we have an acquisition issue. So why are we making a new video every week? We can have the same video work for 6 to 12 months, and then we can be spending the rest of the time doing other things and not actually feeling so busy and maybe getting out when the surf is good. This is also video footage of sewage spilling into St. Agnes. This is Trevornance Cove. We posted this on our LinkedIn and it went viral. One of 21 spills already this year. So this is a double entendre. If you're not already making work in the most sustainable way, follow the Albert Sustainable Production Guidelines. BBC do everything through it. It's really easy. It's simple things like get rid of single-use plastic. Make sure that everybody travels through public transport. Like, just do yourself a favor, do that. And whilst you're at it, scan this one. If we had MPs, I would tell you, I would have done a QR code to write to your MP and tell them to support legislation against our water companies for poisoning our waters, but we can't do that. You can do that next week. But in the meantime, sign up to Surfers Against Sewage. They're amazing. They're our neighbors down in Cornwall. They've been working for 30 years to clean up our waterways, and our waterways are just getting worse. It's criminal. Last one, be brave. It's so easy to be boring. It's so easy to do what everybody else has done and to follow the well-trodden path. But like, I don't think anybody wants to be boring. I think people want to do great work, and I think people want to have a positive impact. Just own personal legacy, thinking about what you want to leave behind. Be proud of that, and be proud of your mistakes that you're inevitably going to make along the way. Okay, one last tip. Or vote. Sorry, this is number 11. If you haven't already done so, do it. These are Surfers Against Sewage. We sponsored this van. It's been going around the nation for the last 30 days, showing up at local hustings. I hope they've had the impact that we all need. But if you haven't already voted, make sure you do so today. That's it.
Thank you very, very much, Bronwen. Does anyone have a question out in the audience? Oh, wonderful. We're up.
Much. Hello, that was an amazing speech, so thank you very much for putting that on. So I grew up in Hastings, and the sea has always been a constant in my life. Love the sea. Of course, you mentioned around kind of the sewage crisis is happening at the moment, and it's a huge deal, all the shit in the sea, literal shit. Finisterre, you obviously mentioned that you've been supporting that cause there. Are Finisterre as a brand doing anything like within to support that? Because of course you mentioned you sponsored others, but Finisterre have such a huge voice in the sea sport community. Is there anything happening? I'm just out of interest.
Yeah, I mean, we work with Surfers Against Sewage because they're the experts in the space. So creating through community means we go, well, what do you need? How can we amplify your voice? So last year we did a huge protest on Parliament together with XR, Greenpeace. I think there was about 300 NGOs. We had sign painting in our stores ahead of time, and then invited our community along, showed up at Westminster. We regularly do Surfers Against Sewage. They host community events in our store space. I mean, even the volunteer hours that they give all of our staff, we have 3 volunteer days to use a year, and about 50% of the staff predominantly use them through Surfers Against Sewage, beach cleans, that type of thing. So it's really easy for us because we also see the sewage issue, and they're our neighbors. We're literally we work next door to them. There's always more we can be doing. But yeah, it's about amplifying the work that they're up to rather than trying to create something new.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for the speech. On B-Corp, I find really interesting, so I've been working on a company that's also just been accredited as B-Corp, and I wondered if you had or experienced a similar problem, is that the framework's really great and is a really important one, but the issue, or the challenge we had was, as a creative team, we were saying, okay, we're always used to trying to be different to other people, but because the framework's so clear, every brand is actually saying the same thing about themselves, and so every other clothing brand is also saying we're balancing people, planet and profit together. And so I'm just interested in how did you also experience that, and then how did you try and make sure that you were still differentiated in your messaging around B Corp?
Yeah, great question. We don't do B Corp as a marketing activity. So we do B Corp as a business framework to make sure that we're held accountable to being a better business. Sometimes we market it, sometimes we don't. It's a really easy, shorthand, okay, they're better. As people learn more about B Corp for consumers, it's kind of like, oh, well, if I'm choosing between A and B and one is B and the other isn't, then I'll go with that. But we don't see it as a marketing asset. It's flawed as well. I mean, they've been criticized, but they're still the best one out there. So it's like, well, until something better comes along, that's the framework that we're going to hold ourselves accountable to. And it resonates with some customers. It doesn't resonate with others. It resonates in some markets. It doesn't. So the biggest thing is that a lot of marketers say, I want to be B Corp. And I'm like, well, no, your CEO needs to be saying that, and your board needs to be saying that, because also it takes a really long time, especially if you have a supply chain. So I think that's the biggest thing, is don't become overly reliant on it.
Thank you.
One down there.
Thank you. As your resident mole and crowd investor, I've got no bias at all, but that was a good presentation. Following on from the B Corp chat on the number 9 that you talked about, don't do shitty work. It seems that in the last couple of years, people have become more cynical about purpose comms, right? So even Mark Pritchard at P&G talked about it. They realise there's commercial benefits when you move away from just certain types of vapid communication. As you well know, Bron, you talked about this. 4 Ps of marketing. Yeah. People really use the promotional lever too much as their way to project purpose, right? So there's a lot of noise out there about what's purpose and what isn't. So the question is, I guess, is how do Finisterre really differentiate and stand out from all the BS, basically? And if there's social comms or events, how do you respond to the cynics?
So it was hard to hear you, but I think the question is, how do we remain
Never heard that before, but thanks.
No, it's because the speakers are going that way. So the question is, how do we remain distinct when everyone has purpose? And yeah, great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I think the big thing is it's distinct, not different. We are cold water surf at our core, even though only 5% of our customers actually surf. We had a number of years where we moved away from surf because we were given some bad advice. We were told it's too niche, that doesn't speak to enough people. And we became a bit more I think we called it easy adventure. And we started looking like everybody else in the space, especially because there's a lot of mountain-based outdoor apparel. The majority of outdoor apparel brands are mountain-based. We're sea-based. So we became a bit mountainy, and then we lost all distinctiveness. We started looking, it was a lot of bearded white guys staring into the middle distance. They were just too handsome. I was like, we've got to get rid of the really, really good-looking guys and get some more realistic men not looking into the middle distance and having a bit more grit. So that work to pull us back into cold water surf as our core is about keeping that distinctiveness, because there are tons of brands out there that have purpose, that are B-Corp, that are doing this work, and we were at risk of just ending up looking like them. So it's that point of the purpose around find your customer, and then doing that dead test, you figure out what is that magic thing for them, and then lean into it, and know that you're not gonna speak to everyone, and that's okay. But if you're good enough at your work and the brand has resonance, then you'll attract way more people to it than you might originally think. Does that work? Yes?
Final one.
So you mentioned at the beginning, obviously, growing into different regions, but almost the cultural essence of the brand is so grounded in Cornwall and it's beautiful. But how does that then transcend into other regions? Do you find you have to adapt in any way, or it's culturally different?
Yeah, definitely. Outside of the UK, we're not a Cornish brand. People don't know what Cornwall is. They're like, Cornish, what's that? Ooh, is that like a potato? So in the US, we are a cold water surf brand. And we still, we're absolutely transparent and celebrate where we're from and why Cornwall is beautiful. But where in the UK, again, to be distinctive, being Cornish is part of what makes us distinct. What we're seeing in other markets, less so. Apart from Germany, because there's a German program where people go walking through Cornwall and they love pull dark. So the Germans love Cornwall, but the rest of the world doesn't know where it is. In particular, North Americans. Yeah.
One final question. Yeah.
Hey, amazing speech. Thank you so much. I just wanted to ask a question about how you differentiate, especially when you're amplifying sort of marginalized stories. How do you differentiate between, this is actually really, really important that we are respecting illustrators, and just like people who are arguing trolls on the internet and just sort of squeaky wheels who inevitably end up getting the oil?
So it's hard to hear. So that was, how do we differentiate between the illustrators that were annoyed and the people that wanted to do?
Or just like, all right, this is a thing that's really, really important that we fix, and this is just noise about people who just want to be heard.
Just want to be heard. Good question. So, I mean, the design competition was such a specific thing that they were angry about. They were actually extra angry that it was us. So they hold us to a higher degree of higher expectations. So there was a lot of we thought better of you. How could you do this as purpose-driven? We also just get people, being nasty in the comments, but we've created community guidelines too, which has empowered our team to delete things that anything is hate speech. We don't get a lot of other hate. We get angry emails about the fact that we're growing. We get people going oh, but you're B-Corp and you're about sustainability. Why are you growing? And it's well, how dare we want to prove that being a better business is profitable, and we have employees that want a pay rise every year, and we want to pay our suppliers more, and we want to continue to innovate. So we actually tackle those ones quite head on and go, this is the reality, is that we exist as a business. We're not a charity. We're proud of that. We believe there's space for us, and we believe that if we can prove to the world that it's profitable to be a better business, then more companies will make that switch, and that's okay. And that generally quietens them. Often, I also get on calls. I'll say, oh, hey, you're super angry about this. Why don't we jump on a call together? And then they're like, holy shit, I'm going to have to talk to somebody, but I'm much angrier in writing form, and they usually never reply. But I've also had some really great conversations where I was like, oh, so you were really annoyed that we supported Pride last year. Let me hear about that, and then let me tell you why we're not going to back down. And I hope you have a more open mindset moving forward. And we're okay to lose people. We don't want them along for the ride anyway if they're going to be angry about some of the things that we believe in.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Bronwen. That was really, really good and great questions.